The 28th of May, 1453. The sun sets over the Bosphorus, for the last time, over a Roman city. Inside the ancient walls of Constantinople, a civilization that had endured for over 1,000 years prepares for what many already believe will be its final night. The streets are quiet, not with peace, but with dread. Citizens gather in churches. Soldiers sharpen blades. They are not certain they will live to clean. And in the great Hagia Sophia, the last emperor of Rome kneels in prayer. His name is Constantine XI Palaiologos. He is 58 years old, a soldier emperor, in the truest sense, calm, dignified, and under no illusions about what tomorrow will bring. He has ruled for 4 years, inheriting an empire already reduced to little more than a single city. The vast territories that once stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia are gone. What remains is Constantinople itself, magnificent, exhausted, and almost entirely alone. Outside those walls, the force assembled against it is unlike anything Europe or the Near East has seen in generations. Sultan Mehmed II, just 21 years old, commands an army estimated at between 80,000 and 100,000 men. He is brilliant, obsessive, and driven by a singular ambition that has consumed him since childhood, to take this city. He has studied its defenses. He has read the ancient texts. He has commissioned the construction of the largest cannons in the history of warfare, cast by a Hungarian engineer named Urban, whose weapons could hurl stone balls weighing over 500 kilograms across distances that no wall had ever been designed to withstand. The siege had begun 53 days earlier, on April 6th, and in those 53 days, Constantinople had done something remarkable. It had held. The city's defenders numbered fewer than 10,000. Many sources place the total closer to 7,000 Byzantine Greeks, Genoese mercenaries, Venetian sailors, and volunteers from across what remained of Christendom. Their commander on the ground was a Genoese soldier named Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, a man of exceptional tactical skill who had volunteered his services and brought with him 700 of his own men. He organized the defense with precision and determination, reinforcing the weakest sections of the Theodosian walls, the great triple-layered fortifications that had protected the city since the 5th century. Those walls were a marvel of engineering. Stretching nearly 6 kilometers across the peninsula, they consisted of an outer wall, a second inner wall, taller and thicker than the first, and a massive main wall beyond that, each separated by a wide terrace. For 1,000 years, they had repelled Avars, Bulgars, Arabs, and Crusaders. They were not simply stone. They were the reason Constantinople had survived when every other city of the late Roman world had fallen. But they had never faced cannons like these. Urban's Great Bombard, nicknamed the Basilica, required 60 oxen to transport and over 200 men to operate. It could only be fired 7 times per day each shot, requiring hours of cooling and reloading. Yet each shot tore sections of wall apart that had stood for centuries. The Byzantines worked through the nights to repair the damage, filling the gaps with timber, earth, and rubble. They held the line through April, through May, through week after week of bombardment, assault, and desperate counterattack. Inside the city, morale was fragile but defiant. Constantine sent urgent appeals to Western Europe, to the Pope, to Venice, to Genoa, to Hungary, begging for relief forces that never came. A small Venetian fleet had slipped through the Ottoman naval blockade in late April, bringing some supplies and lifting spirits briefly, but no great army was coming. The emperor knew this. His generals knew this. And slowly, so did the people. On the night of May 28th, Mehmed made his decision. The final assault would come before dawn. He moved through his camp personally, speaking to his commanders, inspiring his soldiers with the promise of 3 days of plunder, the traditional reward for a city taken by storm. Religious scholars accompanied him, reminding the troops of the religious significance of the conquest. The Ottoman forces prayed, lit fires, and prepared in a mood that observers described as both solemn and electric. Inside Constantinople, the mood was different. Constantine XI gathered his commanders and his court for what everyone understood might be a final meeting. He spoke with remarkable composure. He thanked his allies. He asked forgiveness for any wrongs he had done. He spoke of the honor of dying in defense of one's city and one's faith. Then he rode through the streets, visiting the walls one last time, before returning to the Hagia Sophia. That night, an extraordinary thing happened. In a city divided for decades by bitter theological disputes between Orthodox and Catholic Christianity, disputes so fierce that many Byzantines had declared they would rather see Ottoman turbans in Constantinople than Catholic. Cardinals, those divisions fell silent. Orthodox and Catholic worshipped together in the Hagia Sophia. The great church, which had stood for nearly 1,000 years, was filled with candles, prayer, and the sound of voices that had long refused to join together. It was a moment of unity forged entirely by the shadow of extinction. Constantine left the church near midnight. He said goodbye to his court, embraced those around him, and asked forgiveness once more. Then he rode to the walls. The assault began in the early hours of May 29th, well before dawn. Mehmed sent his forces in waves, a deliberate tactical decision designed to exhaust the defenders. First came the irregular troops, Anatolian levies, men from the fringes of the Ottoman forces, not elite soldiers, but useful for wearing down the defenders and probing for weaknesses. The Byzantines held. Then came the Anatolian regulars, more disciplined, more dangerous. Again, the walls held, the defenders fighting in the torchlight with a ferocity born of desperation. Giovanni Giustiniani directed the defense from the most critical section of wall near the gate of St. Romanos, where the land walls were most vulnerable. His leadership was crucial. As long as he stood, the line held. Then, sometime before dawn, he was struck. A crossbow bolt, some accounts say a gunshot pierced his armor. The wound was serious. Giustiniani, in tremendous pain and potentially losing consciousness, asked to be carried from the walls. Constantine reportedly begged him to stay, but he was taken, through a gate, to a ship in the harbor. The effect on the defenders was immediate and devastating. The sight of their most skilled commander being carried away broke something in the morale of the line. In the confusion, a small gate nearby the Kirkoporta was found unlocked. Some accounts say it had been left open accidentally after a sortie. Others suggest it was discovered by chance. Whatever the cause, Ottoman soldiers poured through it. At almost the same moment, Mehmed committed his elite forces, the Janissaries, his most disciplined and feared infantry, fresh and fully armored, crashing into a defense that was already beginning to fracture. Within minutes, the wall was breached. Ottoman soldiers raised their flags from the ramparts. Defenders, seeing those flags, understood what it meant. The line collapsed. Constantine XI Palaiologos, last emperor of Rome, saw his city fall. He threw off his imperial regalia, the purple cloak, the symbols of his office, so that he would not be taken alive as a prize. He drew his sword and charged into the oncoming soldiers. He was never seen again. No confirmed account of his death exists. No body was ever definitively identified. Some stories say he died fighting at the walls, cut down in the melee. Others suggest he was killed and buried in a mass grave, unrecognized. A few later legends claimed he had not died at all, that he had been turned to marble by an angel and buried beneath the Golden Gate, waiting to rise again when the city was restored. History offers no clean ending. The last Roman emperor simply vanished into the chaos of his empire's final moments. By mid-morning on May 29th, 1453, it was over. Mehmed II entered Constantinople on horseback through the gate of St. Romanos. He was 21 years old. He rode through streets that were already witnessing the looting his victory had promised his troops. Churches were stripped, libraries were ransacked. Centuries of accumulated manuscripts, art, and artifacts disappeared in hours, lost, destroyed, or scattered across the Mediterranean world, never to be reassembled. Mehmed rode directly to the Hagia Sophia. He dismounted and reportedly took a handful of earth and poured it over his turban, a gesture of humility before God, a reminder that even this moment of supreme triumph was fleeting. Inside the church, he gave orders that it be converted into a mosque immediately. A cleric climbed the pulpit and offered the first Islamic prayer in the building that had served as the heart of Eastern Christianity for 916 years. Mehmed II would go on to call himself Kaiser-i Rum, Caesar of Rome. He genuinely believed himself to be the heir to the Roman imperial tradition, not its destroyer. He worked to repopulate Constantinople, which he renamed Istanbul, though the name Constantinople remained in common usage for centuries, bringing in settlers from across the Ottoman world. He appointed a new Greek Orthodox patriarch. He positioned himself as a ruler of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire in the tradition of Rome itself. Whether that vision was sincere or strategic, history does not fully resolve. What history does record is the result. The city survived, transformed, yes, renamed, yes, but it survived. The Hagia Sophia stood. The great forums and columns still rose above the skyline. Constantinople, now Istanbul, would go on to become one of the most magnificent capitals in the world, the center of an Ottoman empire that would itself last nearly 5 centuries. But for the world that watched from afar, the fall of Constantinople in 1453 was a moment of profound shock and consequence. It severed the last living link to ancient Rome. The Eastern Roman Empire, which historians would later call the Byzantine Empire, a term the Byzantines themselves never used, had endured for 1,058 years after the fall of Rome in the West. It had preserved Roman law, Greek philosophy, early Christian theology, and classical literature through the darkest centuries of the medieval period. Its scholars had kept alive texts that would otherwise have been lost entirely. Its art and architecture had shaped the visual language of Christianity across Europe. Now, it was gone. The fall sent shockwaves through Europe. It accelerated an already underway migration of Byzantine scholars westward, particularly to Italy, where their knowledge and their manuscripts fed directly into the intellectual explosion we call the Renaissance. It reshaped trade routes. As the Ottoman control of Constantinople disrupted the overland and eastern Mediterranean commerce that had connected Europe to Asia for centuries, a disruption that would push European powers to search for new routes west, south, contributing to the age of exploration that would reshape the entire world within decades. It marked, for many historians, the true end of the Middle Ages. The 29th of May, 1453. A single date, a single city. A single night that took an empire that had survived plagues, civil wars, crusades, and centuries of siege, and ended it before the sun had fully risen. Constantine VII had known what was coming. He had chosen to stay. He had chosen to fight. He had chosen to die or disappear as an emperor rather than live as a captive. In the long record of how civilizations end, there are few exits as dignified or as final as his. The walls still stand today. Visitors walk along the Theodosian fortifications in modern Istanbul, past towers that were breached in the pre-dawn darkness of that May morning over 5 centuries ago. The Hagia Sophia still stands mosque, then museum, then mosque again, its dome still rising above the Bosphorus, still visible from miles away. Still one of the most breathtaking structures human hands have ever built. History does not forget what happened within those walls, but it also does not mourn in one direction only. What ended that night was real. What began was also real. And the world that emerged from that single turning point, reshaped, redirected, set on courses that would lead to exploration, to renaissance, to revolution, is the world we still inhabit today. The last night of Constantinople was not only an ending, it was, quietly and violently and irrevocably, a beginning.